topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Elise Cortez.
Hi there, welcome back to the Working on Purpose program. Thanks for tuning in again this week. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, joining you live from Dallas, Texas, which is home base for me. If you don't know me yet, I'm a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, organizational logotherapist, inspirational speaker, social scientist, and author. You can learn more about me and how we can work together at elisecortez.com or gusto-now.com. Let me thank my partner and sponsor, WorkProud. We are a perfect collaboration. Everyone wants to know they matter and that the work they do is meaningful and appreciated. WorkProud is a mobile platform built to encourage employees to share stories and recognize each other's contribution. WorkProud empowers HR and business leaders to help create company cultures where all employees are inspired to feel proud of their work and proud of their company. Learn more at workproud.com. With us today is Susan Lucci, who is passionate about encouraging women to reconnect to their essential nature and bravely turn up their soul shine to bring more of their authentic selves into the world. She is a purpose guide and has developed the circle model to bring women together through the ancient archetype to facilitate more soulful conversations and create more engaged communities. She has a chapter in the book, Purpose Rising, a global movement of transformation and meaning, which is how I originally came across her and then asked her to come on the show. Today, we'll be talking about the state of purpose in the world, learn more about the circle work she does, and explore the movement she sees emerging, the culture of care. She joins us today from Chicago. Susan, welcome to Working on Purpose.
Hello, Elise. I'm happy to be here.
It is so great. You know, it's so great when I read someone's work and then I reach out and that kind of starts stalking you, right? So then I reached out to you on LinkedIn, then I found you in the Global Purpose Leaders Group, and you really couldn't get away from me. So thank you for finally saying yes and coming on.
Thank you for stalking. Why not?
I've met so many amazing people doing that. And I haven't gotten arrested once yet. So it's great.
Just following your passion.
Yeah. Well, I just love how you describe your journey to purpose. We want to start there since we're going to situate this first part of the conversation around the purpose in the world. And I just want to start because purpose is one of those kind of things that it reveals itself to us is one way to see it. And one of the things that you say in your work is you say your first interpretation of your purpose was as a lawyer, as advocating for other people. But there was something particular about that experience that really started to help you resonate with your purpose. So let's start there.
All right, great. That seemed to be what I was here to do. As a little girl, I was in my dad's law firm, and as the oldest child, was always gently prodded to speak up for others and stand up to bullies on playgrounds. So I've been doing that for decades now, and really took a lot of pleasure out of speaking up for people who could not speak up for themselves, and whether that was then negotiating for them in law firms, and also some of my coworkers speaking out for them when they needed to be represented and that kind of thing. So I love that word advocacy. I still do that in lots of different ways today, but at the heart of it is that word voice, the Latin word vocal. So about that and helping people to really activate their potential by finding their voice is where it has evolved into from that point.
I want to echo that phrase you just said right there, Susan. It's so beautiful. Activate their potential. Oh, talk about exercising agency in the world. That is so beautiful.
Yeah, the way I hold purpose is if you think about an acorn becoming an oak tree, and it's all potential. That becoming that happens between the seed and the bursting open and all of the moving through the environment to become an oak tree. And each of us have that same entelechy, that same potential in us, and it is shaped a lot by our environments. But there's also that acornness or that Eliseness, that Sue-ness of each of us that I think is the fun revelatory process that you referenced.
Mm-hmm. I love how you said that.
Yeah, that potential, and it's within us, and it's also between us, right? So even more is activated between us in our conversation. Even today.
Absolutely. In this conversation, what we're going to talk about a little bit later with your circles work for sure. So now I want to drill down a little bit deeper here, which I think is so interesting what you did and some of the reading that you shared with me or some of the writing that you shared with me. I think it's interesting that you started to reflect somewhere in your life. I'm not sure where this happened, but you go on to depict that your Montessori teacher and Mr. Rogers, I love that, played key roles in helping you discern your purpose. So now this is great for our listeners and viewers who are many people listening because they're trying to discover their purpose, right? That's why they're here. So how have you come to understand your purpose today and its expression going back through those experiences and those people?
Yeah, really through moments. Those are actually two more recent reveals to me in the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years. There was a day, we will talk more about Circle, but sitting in Circle where I came out and I had a memory of being a little girl sitting on a rug where the circle was taped and just looking left and right. And there were children of all different colors. Rare in my then upbringing, but I was 2 years old sitting on this circle with Miss Janine, who has since passed, but remained in my life for many decades. And she called me the center room baby. It was the Montessori center room in Cincinnati that my mom and her twin sister founded. And she called me the center room baby because I was the youngest that had ever gone. I wasn't even 2 when I was going, but the culture we had there that was so inclusive and so diverse, and learning about other cultures. At one point, I thought we were in Peru. I mean, the way she could just help us really embrace other cultures. And I grew up in a very strict, my mom was very strict and very, she really vetted, anything that we took into our bodies, but also TV was very limited. But Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was a show, and watching the film that was made a couple of years ago really reminded me of that deep love to be neighborly, and how that even from a very young age, we would shovel the snow on our neighbors' driveways before we shoveled our own snow. It just was part of my family culture growing up to be neighborly. And if I bring that all the way forward to COVID, I would say connecting with new neighbors was one of our survival mechanisms here. So I really treasure, along with the diversity that Mr. Rogers stood for and how he was talking to the mailman and inviting people in and so many radical, edgy moves for the time. So that's something I could then learn and watch that movie, and it just broke open in me that memory of how deep my love for community and inclusive community went.
I can virtually guarantee you, Susan, that you have just opened something in listeners and viewers who heard you say that, including me, because I was also very attracted to Mr. Rogers, and I now I recognize that it was because I align with his whole value and notion of the goodness in the world and aspiring for goodness and being kind. And so there's something, listeners and viewers, what I would encourage you to do from what you just shared is consider, what did you gravitate to when you were younger? What did you watch? What was there for you? So that share was beautiful, Susan, and wholly unanticipated. Thank you very much. Well, so here we are in a world, it's 2021, and you really can't go anywhere without hearing 2 words in one day: meaning and purpose. And so there seems to be really an obsession with purpose these days. And there's a lot of confusion, as both you and I know, about what that actually means. There's overuse and underuse of that word. But there's an elusiveness to it as well. So I'd love your perspective as somebody who is a purpose guide, is what do you see about this? Are we obsessed with purpose? What's going on with this?
Well, I think we are bothered by a huge expectation around purpose. I myself went through this too, where I thought that to be on purpose, to know my purpose, meant I had to change the entire world. And that was all squarely placed on my shoulders. And if I wasn't doing something about it that had impact and could be measured and valued, then I was just not purposeful. And I have since heard that from a number of clients, but that's not purpose, but that's not big enough. That's not impactful enough. That's not changing the world. And so I've like, wow, we really need to bring this down to its essential nature, which is in your tagline, an ache for meaning. And to me, the moments that I have felt most embodying my purpose have been when I was needing that ache for meaning in the world and doing something with it and moving it into the world, or being a presence that was drawing that in or connecting with other people. So I think our minds have gotten a hold of that word purpose, which is an ancient concept. As far as I can tell, Aristotle was teaching about purpose. And it is essential to our nature as human beings. And then somehow along the way, it got taken off, probably through consumer capitalism, that it had to be saving the world. And so I think COVID, I think our times now have really helped us land this, to embody it, that we are meaning makers. We are Homo sapiens, those who know that we know. And I think that is what gives us the juice of life, is when we make meaning. And the older I get, the more I'm reminded that it's up to me to do that. I've been through a lot of education, as you have too, and read a lot of books. People can teach you things, but when you make meaning for yourself, that to me is the most alive, I feel.
Me too. That's my jam, meaning and purpose. I love it. I've been doing it and it's my ache, right? To your point, one of the paths to purpose is by really examining what's ails you your whole life. What have you learned by being obsessed with something that has bothered you? And I was bothered about the lack of meaning and purpose, and that's why I do what I do today. So, yeah, it's amazing. And that brings us to where we've been for the last 15, 16 months, this whole COVID thing. And one of the things that you and I talked about in our exchanges is how COVID and the quarantine has created some perfect conditions for a purpose journey. I want to hear more about your perspective on that. I have my own, but let's hear yours.
Yeah, well, it is interesting that in some Zoom calls, of the many Zoom calls I was on, we had to look at the rectangle that we're in as our cocoon, right? As this alchemical cauldron for our activating our purpose. But when I guide someone through a purpose journey or accompany them on their journey, it's months long, the way that I was taught. And about 2/3 of the way through, we actually create the conditions where they can separate, they can leave home, get out of the ordinary, the daily, be immersed in nature as much as they are comfortable, and really slow down to the speed of the soul. And so if I look at even those three parts, I mean, that's what COVID did. I wasn't many weeks into it when I was like, oh my gosh, here we are. We are completely separated from each other, from what we call normal, this daily way of living. The quiet around here, even in Chicago, was just so beautiful. The stillness. I noticed people just getting outside no matter what. We had a really terrific winter in Chicago, 3 feet of snow, but we were all getting out. There was something really interesting about us being in nature. And then having that time to reflect. I noticed a lot more conversations about what matters most. We started talking about what's essential. Essential workers have always been on our planet in our cultures, right? Nurses and teachers, suddenly it's like, what's essential? We're cheering for them. We're tying white ribbons around what's essential, the big question on a purpose journey. So I was like, here we are, right in the middle of a purpose crisis / opportunity, and sharing that moment together. I don't think we've yet unpacked exactly what has been happening.
No, it's continuing to unfurl. I want to go back quickly because you say so many great poetic things. I love the way that you use language. And I really am getting a sense, Susan, that I think it comes from something really deep, not just in your person, but that you're connected to across the world and in our collective past. That's kind of what I'm getting from you. It's really beautiful. It's really beautiful. It's kind of, like almost like gobsmacking me, which is such a great thing. But one of the things that you just said is that it allowed us to slow down to the speed of the soul. That's so eminently quotable. Slow down to the speed of the soul. So just my perspective on it is thinking about it from the vantage point of how we're creating workplaces where we actually want to come to work and where we can actually thrive and do business that betters the world. One of the things that I think is really interesting, one, we were all packed, and so our whole routine was stopped, which was necessary, an important intervention, if you will. But then now here we are, we've now changed and got some new perspective on what life and work is. And so now what I find interesting, Susan, in my work, I've stumbled across this notion of the Great Resignation. I've written some articles about this for some of my clients, but that really entails that depending on who you read about this, it's projected that anywhere from 33 to 50% of the North American workforce plans to change jobs in 2021. That's due to pent-up demand for change, not feeling like they're growth enough, just a need for something different, not feeling appreciated in their current role, lots of things, needing a change in life, right? And so people are changing locations where they live. There's all this churn that's going on here. So what's your perspective on this notion of the change in the workplace and the change in where people are deciding to live?
Yeah, the big shift, the big quit. It is, we are definitely, and I'm going through this as well, where somebody knocked on our door 2 weeks ago. We're actually in the process of selling our house. So
wow.
I'm part of it. There's first, for hire, looking for people to hire around me. My husband and his business has 50 job openings right now. So I'm really immersed in this and curious about it. It's in the conversation is, I think what's happening is we're asking these big questions and we woke up to, this is not working for me. I've heard that from a lot of folks, is this is no longer working, and at so many different levels. And I think people feel empowered maybe from the constraints of what I call the longest winter ever. And now that they're coming out with spring, I'm hopeful, and I'm also seeing more intentionality. And because of this, I think deeper connection with our souls, because of the purpose journey here, coming out with more resolution, more intention. We have seen a lot of death, Elise. I mean, I know you lost your folks right before I lost my mom. During COVID, 600,000 deaths just in America, more around the globe. I mean, death was right here. We got to see how fragile life is. And I think that awakens something deep in us that wants to be, here's the kind of community I want. Here's the kind of people I want to work with. Here's the kind of work I want to do. And so I'm hopeful that employers are really listening. I think we need some wage adjustments for starts, but I think the workability of our environments is really going to shift because of this demand. So I think it's really exciting, and we're just in the middle of all of it. So for folks who don't like adaptation and change, I think it's a really hard time. I heard a lot, are we going to go back to normal? I hope not. There was a lot not great about normal, so
Beautifully said. I agree. I think it's a great opportunity, and it's very scary for people that don't like change and adaptation. You're right. And the Great Resignation also illuminated just how unnatural the way we have been working really is. That's part of what's written in that idea, is it illuminated how crazy the way we actually have been working really is. The crazy commutes, sitting in a cubicle, long meetings. What are we doing here? So yeah, so much we could unpack on that. But I also find it to be very exciting, and helping companies through this crisis is part of what I've been really up to in the last probably 4 months now.
Oh, that's beautiful. I'm so grateful to hear you're in their ear.
Yeah, it's just so, I'm having more fun than I'm supposed to have, which we talked about just before we got on the air. So don't tell anybody. Let's grab our first break.
What's really great is people are listening. I think we're listening because we're coming out of this place. And so that is such an important human quality that I didn't experience a lot of in the law firm decades ago. I didn't experience a lot in the political arenas. And I think that's a great opportunity right now. Let's listen. Let's really listen to each other.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful, Susan. What a great way to take us into our first break. I'm Elise Cortez, your host. We're on the air with Susan Lucci. She is a soulful facilitator, circle convener, and purpose guide. We've been talking a bit about purpose in the world. After the break, we're going to get into her circle work that she does. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at EliseCortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. As I watch the pandemic continue on, we look for ways to help companies support their employees handle the anxiety, stress, depression, and feeling disconnected, while also helping to lift and inspire them with ongoing professional development. So we now offer a well-being webinar learning series called Grab Your Gusto, Vital Wellbeing from the Inside Out. You can learn more about it by emailing me at elise@elisecortez.com or go to the website elisecortez.com and check it out there. If you're just joining the program, my guest today is Susan Lucci, who has a chapter in the book called Purpose Rising, a global movement of transformation and meaning. It is calling in from Chicago. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. So Susan, this next part here, I want to talk about the work that you do with circles. But first, I want to situate really how you talk about how it came about, which I think is really interesting. And I am certain that many listeners are also going to resonate with this. But you say that after a very intentional motherhood and raising 3 children, you longed for more meaningful connections and conversations and heard the ache of so many other successful women to discover what they were here to do. So tell us more about how your circle work and your purpose guide work came from that ache and that listening.
All right, great. Well, I think it was because I finally started sleeping through the night again after having 3 babies in 4 years. And I started reading again. And actually the book, The Da Vinci Code, fell off the shelf and woke me up to the sacred feminine, which is part of this journey. And then we moved and bought a house, and this is 2005. I had already been laid off once as a lawyer. My husband was laid off 3 different times as a lawyer and investment banker. So here we were, 3 children in this house, and it was looking like I had to go back to the law firm. And my soul was just not having that. Just felt like, so I'm out, putting myself out in the world. The kids are getting in school. I'm starting to read again. And I start joining book clubs thinking, this is how I will be able to start having conversations, bigger conversations than about the diapers and, all the things of raising children. And, I just wasn't satisfied in the level of conversation. So I found myself just even out and bumping into strangers. And I could ask these big questions that were stirring in my soul. And as it would turn out, there was another book, This Time I Danced by Tamma Keeves, that came to me. And I ended up inviting her into my living room. And I had 30 women come one night, and she did a workshop. And afterwards, she did one coaching call. And it turns out this circle concept had been bubbling in me and in my journals for quite a while. And a group of the women from that night wrote to me and said, what are we going to do next? So we started meeting in my living room once a month. And it was great because I was taking all the books I was reading. It was all sacred feminine stuff at the time. And I was bringing it in. I was playing with this model of like, let's slow down, listen to one person at a time, and have a conversation about something that matters. And it was really incredible, like transformational almost from the beginning, that people and the women in that group started like picking up dreams they had when they were younger, going back to school, starting businesses. It was just incredible in that year what happened. And then they turned to me and said, you should do this. And I was like, I wonder what this is. And then I started reading more that actually Circle is a model of conversation. And I do it uniquely by weaving in so much learning and personal development work. And then also the power of women sitting together. I had been a lawyer and raised my kids. I had women come that had professions, worked in the corporate world, had raised children, had taken care of parents, and they were waking up to what's next. And it turns out that us slowing down, turning off our phones, closing the door, focusing on ourselves, and me holding this safe and what became sacred space to ask these big questions, and then us mirroring each other, like really remembering who we are and sharing it with each other, like, oh my gosh, Elise, I just heard you say this, and what that did. Because for most of us in those initial circles, and later I've learned too, we've been in situations where we've harmed each other, right? Where maybe there was gossip, or we didn't support each other because we felt competitive. And so what we were practicing was this way of like, what if we uplift each other? What if we support each other and get really brave and share our dreams and our concerns and brainstorm together what we're doing? And it started becoming this like activation place. And before you knew it, I was doing like 5 of these a week with women. And then we looked around and they said, we all have 9-year-old girls. Shouldn't we know this stuff when we're little? So then I started sitting on the floor on Friday afternoons with 9-year-old girls and practicing this. What I learned was an ancient art form that was just coming through me as an archetype, to light a candle in the middle, to set intention, to meditate a little bit, slow down so I could really listen, to what's in here. It just was magical. So I'm so grateful for that whole confluence of events. And maybe the listeners are thinking too, sometimes life just hands you this perfect storm. And I could have gone back to a law firm, and something inside of me that ached for something more said, no way, no way.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I'm present to, Susan, one of the things that I can't help doing, and I'm doing this with you and said it before, is when I listen to you and I read what you shared with me, I am very present that you have a unique vantage point, which I believe comes through your ability. It's your purpose lens, right? What you see in the world that needs doing or that you can do. I really feel like you are connected to this ancient wisdom in a way that most of us aren't. And it is part of your unique being and fabric. And that is what you're bringing to the equation. You're connecting us back through, generations, millennia. That's what I get when I talk with you. It's not just Susan. You're sort of like, not just a mouthpiece, because there's much more to you than that. But I really get that you're standing on, millennia of hearts, minds, and souls that came before you. So I get that. And so we get the benefit of that. And so when I think about, wow, what does that feel like? I can't even imagine. And then I know you say that you've facilitated more than 600 circles in 11 years, and all these ranges, the getting the benefit of that. I can't even imagine that, Susan. What's that like?
It really feels it's so beautiful. So every time you can really have a conversation like this, like you just illuminated another aspect that I hadn't really articulated or put together before. So thank you for that. So fun, especially when purpose peeps get together. But what it feels like in the middle of being in circle is just complete and utter joy. It just feels like opening to something that's way bigger than me. That's why my website is too big for words, because even though I love words like you do, I love reading them, writing them, editing them. Circle experience is just too big for words. But I do really enjoy the preparation and bringing in other voices and weaving them together, because I think that part of that forgetting is helpful in our remembering. And I think part of a purpose journey is constantly remembering who we are. And I think we need each other to do that. And so I think it is helpful to bring in like this ancient wisdom, what Rumi's talking about. It's just incredible. Like, wow, this is so present today in this moment. And I think that's part of that remembering, that there's something really essential here that I too am part of. And so that, often when women come to circle, the first piece that I'll see them as their shoulders lower is they look around, they say, I'm not alone. Mm-hmm. And that feeling of I'm not alone, that we all crave, that ache to belong. And so I think it's more than just these women in this circle. It's like we belong to all these eons of humanity that have been questing for purpose and meaning, that have been questing to make a difference, and seekers, of which I am another one, and then just holding open space for that.
Yeah, I'm guilty. Yes, I'm right there with you. Another word that I'm thinking of for you is conduit. You're a spokesperson, and I think that maybe that's a reflection of your being an attorney and a lawyer. But then I think of you as being a conduit to all this millennia of wisdom and tradition as well. That's another word that I'm thinking of for you. So
it very much feels like that in my body.
Really good.
Yeah, I have been called a force of nature, so it does feel like a conduit for. And even when I teach people my circle model, I will never trademark it or copyright it because it comes through me. And early on, I committed. I have it in my journal that it will be organic. Whatever this is, it will be organic and continue to evolve. And I'm just here to shape and shepherd and hold that however it wants to. And so to me, it's still also advocacy. It's just, I'm holding space for others to really voice. And also this shared consciousness, this, what I call the we space is what I feel like I'm really a conduit to. And that's where we are wiser, right? Where all the potential potency lies. And also, I think, like you're saying, our ancient roots, our history that we're connected to here.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you're speaking now to transformation, right? So it's an elevational process, but in so doing, there's transformation involved. And that bit about what you're facilitating, transformation, connection, wisdom, consciousness. I mean, there's so much happening. And the other thing that you just said that's so beautiful, and listeners and viewers, this is so important, that you said whatever this is. And so, right, a lot of times what is bubbling up from within us, which is uniquely us, this is our unique contribution to the world. And it is, in my view, many ways, your purpose. That is something that only we can do. And it's kind of like just being obedient to that which is coming out of us and being of service through it.
Absolutely. And when I guide people, it's comes so naturally to us that often we don't credit it. We don't value it.
Right. That's
but if
right.
we look around, right, it's like, oh, this is what everybody's coming to me for. And so I think that's a big part of the journey. I know that's a big part of the journey is I'll often have people say, you mean I get to just be me? And that's a huge insight. And it always happens at a certain moment in the journey. And I love it. I'm like, yes. And what does that feel like? What is that like? Now we get to know that. And I agree with you that it's deeply encoded in our DNA that we now know carries both the trauma and also the genius, of our lineages.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you've been talking about facilitating these groups, even in your home and in the afternoon and such, but you've also done this on a bigger, grander level for many organizations. Just one I want to talk about, but this whole idea of bringing humans together. And I know that you've done this for large forums like One Earth Film Festival, which must have been amazing. So how do you convene a group and facilitate something like that at a film festival?
Oh gosh, it just changes the game. And this film fest, we just completed our 10th year, and we're virtual, and it's way more even than the sustainability. I should actually connect you with that leader to have on here, that thought leader. She's amazing.
Love to.
But what we've learned is that it's one thing in that case to watch a film and feel like, oh, good, I see something. Here's how important soil is. But if we can then turn to each other, which is that model, is really turning to each other and beginning to unpack it. What resonated, starting with our senses. What did I see? What did I hear? What did I feel? What touched me? And then begin to move. We move them along the arc of activation and would end in our model. If you imagine a room filled with hundreds of people, and then they can't get out of the room until they meet with all of our strategic partners who are going to help them then find the exact way to activate this awareness that they've just had, this connection they've made to the planet, other people, and then to move into activation. So that conversation piece is really at the heart of it. And mostly we watch movies and just leave the theater, right? And this model is about really being together. And sometimes we have the filmmakers and the directors, so you really get to learn what's involved in this so that you can care, to really open up that part of, I think, that makes us human and makes us actually want to do something we can't not, right? To tap into that field. So holding those spaces is really fun because there's so many people there. And there's a microphone, but I'm just, again, playing with the energy of that room. And we've seen those, the groups swell over the years that I have facilitated that. And so then a certain kind of energy builds in the room, right? This enthusiasm, and you're moved. You can feel that move part of movement, right? That we are actually going to move people to take action, to care more, to do whatever part resonates with them.
I think that would be amazing. It's one thing to go after you watch a movie and go to a coffee spot and have a cappuccino and talk through what you get from the movie, or have a glass of wine afterwards. But to convene a group and have it facilitated, that would be really yummy. So I'm in for the next one.
Yes, we have an amazing team of facilitators, and every year we still revisit the training. Is this the essential model? Is this because we're so deliberate about it? And there's a lot of history even to that model that we use. So I've been so fortunate to do that in an activist kind of way that people can really feel good, because a topic like the environment, right, or climate crisis can be so heavy, and it can be so overwhelming that you don't know what to do. So right. we're flipping that, right, and empowering people. And so some people like to write and do the advocacy. Some people like to march, but there's also all kinds of other things that you can do. And so let's do it together. Then you realize, like, my little action is going to be part of these bigger actions. And we emphasize that quite a bit too.
Susan,
we all
that's
want to
so
be
powerful.
part of, right?
Yeah, so powerful to connect to something like that. That is great. So glad to have you and share you with my listeners and viewers. I'm Elise Cortez, your host. We are on the air with Susan Lucci, who is a soulful facilitator, circle convener, and purpose guide. We've been talking a bit about the work she does with circles. After the break, we're going to talk about the movement she sees emerging in the world. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I mentioned in the first break about the Grab Your Gusto Wellbeing webcast learning series. The content of that program is adapted from part one of my recently published book called Purpose Ignited, How Inspiring Leaders Ignite Passion and Elevate Cause, which is really all about awakening readers to their passion and their purpose and helping to transform them into inspirational leaders who create a workplace where people actually want to come and will thrive. If you're just joining us, my guest today is Susan Lucci, who, among other things, is the co-founder and circle tender of Feel Real, a benefit corporation devoted to co-creating brave spaces for people to engage in real-time, face-to-face, meaningful conversations online. She's calling in today from Chicago. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. Okay, so for this next part of the conversation, let's just really dive into this. This is where I really recognize, Susan, that you really are up to something in the world. And I want to be able to read a small passage from what you sent to me about what you're shaping into a book, because I want the readers to understand and get present to the way you use language. All right, so I'm going to read this. So this is from an introduction that you're working on for your book. To me, it's just titillating. So she says, read along with me to discover for yourself the new consciousness weaving her way through communities of women, connecting, caring for, and uplifting each other. Wander along with us as I share stories evidencing the emerging culture of community-minded activists and artists creating the change we desperately need. The feminine soul is rising up, and she is marching and running for office and changing policy and creating new communities and impacting culture as she reclaims her sovereignty. A new way of being human is bravely and boldly revealing herself in the heart of our country. I'm in, Susan. When's this book coming out? When's it coming out?
You're part of it. You are part of this movement that I see, for sure. You know, when I was writing that part of the book, I was also reading Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, which her wake-up call came from almost a dystopian, although it's not that unrealistic, but it was a very, here's what's going to happen if we keep using toxic chemicals. And so I kept thinking, what if what's missing is us seeing a possible future that we already are becoming? And so that's what came to me to write that. And as I was writing it, I also know women that are doing all of those things, right? So I think what I'm fascinated by is there is a movement, there is an uprising of women around the planet, and it just hasn't been named or noticed in its entirety. So what if we make that visible, this culture of care that is being created and co-created all over the planet? And I saw a lot of that during COVID, how many people are holding circles, for example. I met a lot of facilitators and I was just blown away. Like, here I thought I was holding up my piece of this guy doing circles, and there's people around the globe doing circles. So the other piece about this culture of care that I feel like I'm seeing, just like Paul Hawkins saw this blessed unrest with nonprofits forming a movement. And if I bring it back, our conversation from the first part about purpose, like really what is purpose? And a lot of what's written about purpose is about desire and passion and like following what you love and following your bliss, you know, Joseph Campbell's piece. And what I have learned is that, especially with women, often we are most on purpose when we're following our heartbreak, when it's
Yes.
actually, and not, I'm not talking about our 13-year-old first boyfriend that we broke up with. I'm talking about our deep heartbreak that we can't not do something about, that need in the world. So when I saw women just like, oh gosh, do I have anything else to give? And I could just feel into the potential. I was like, oh, all right, we got to get up to this, we've got to support this and nurture this so that we can do that. And so that's what a lot of my book is about. And the challenge is, I know as a little girl, I was told, don't wear your heart on your sleeve. It's dangerous. And in fact, at one point, I was graduating school working for a litigator, and I was in bad baby cases. And oh my God, did they break my heart? And I came home because I love babies. And I came home at night, and it got to the point I thought, I'm too emotional. I cannot do this work. So I got into the more corporate type work as well. Decades later, I have since come to really appreciate and respect that wearing our heart on our sleeve is exactly what's needed. And it's our superpower to really take our vulnerability, our compassion, all of these beautiful gifts of our heart that move us in the world, that make us do that work that we can't not do. And so I've seen that, and that's what my book is about, is that the culture of care comes through, especially this feminine energy women, waking up to their heartbreak and just doing something about it, caring for each other, running for office. It's incredible. The numbers of women. I stopped after I interviewed dozens of them. I thought, oh my gosh, how am I going to capture all of these? There's so many. So.
I can't wait. This is so great, Susan. It's so interesting and intriguing and compelling to listen to. It's not just listening to you, it's being with you, as you say, your energy that's conveys so much, and your passion, your conviction. This is fascinating. I really don't want to let you go from my listeners and viewers, by the way. So we'll be on for maybe a few more hours. You just, get dinner ordered and we'll call it good. But one of the things that you said, just as you're starting to articulate some of these new thoughts here, is you do talk about this new kind of presence and power that's rising up on the planet, and and you say it's uniquely and fiercely feminine, and you talk specifically about how it's embodied in our teen climate activist Greta Thunberg. I'm not sure how to say her last name, but she brings so much insight and courage in her truth telling that's inspiring massive acts of protest and people coming along with her. And I think that's such a great example of what you're talking about.
Yeah, right. And so wonderfully surprising, I think, for most of us to be, how old is she? What is she?
Right.
And her ferocity, how she can just, right? And we have seen it moves people, right? And so I think there's juice there. I often will say that we have not yet on this planet experienced Mama Bear's roar. A whole group of women coming together, and we care about our planet. We care about our children. We care, and just like that, really taking that energy, that fierce mama bear roar. And even though she's not a mother, I just think Greta embodies that, right? She speaks from that place, and calls us into it, because it's very much then a we place. It's not the hero's journey model of I am Greta and I am running this, right? She's very clear with us. She'd rather be going to school and doing what kids do, right? But because nobody else is up to this, she has to. And so I see that in many different ways and shapes. And I think Shannon Watts, who started the Moms Demand sense around the gun laws and stuff like that, she talks about this too. And I met with her after an event here in Chicago, and I was talking to her about that. Like, what is this power of women coming together? Because and it comes from our hearts, what we care about, what we can no longer stand to let happen in our communities.
So this is so powerful, and I've been having so many really amazing conversations around, if you will, the spigot of the dial, or around the mic about these things. And so this is really important that we talk about this next point, and this whole point of this new balancing energy that you're talking about that's rising up all over the planet. And you say it's in response to toxic masculinity, oppressive patriarchy, and you're really talking about bringing more of a yin to an excessive yang, and this sacred feminine archetype can be embodied in both men and women, of course. And what this is really important, listeners and viewers, this is the point that I want to make here. This energy is not against men. In fact, this uprising is not against anything at all. You're taking a stand for life, and it's the harmony that uplifts others. And it's really important that we talk about this, because I think sometimes when we either talk about what's happening for men or what's happening for women, the other side starts to feel picked on, or what about us? And you're not saying that. You're talking about something what I would consider to be much more pure here.
Yeah, it's absolutely what are we for? What do we care about? And uplifting that. A lot of us, a lot of the women in circles, a lot of the women I purpose guide have made it in the masculine world, right? We have been lawyers and doctors and survived in the corporate world. And there's something else. And I do see this. I think there's plenty of books to be written about men and the sacred masculine and that coming in and then the balance of the two for sure. But what I have been seeing here is uniquely feminine, in women's bodies, coming into their community, what they care about. But it's very much the pro, the what do we stand for, and moving in that direction. And it's also not like this driven achievement type way. It's a whole different. In fact, sometimes we're just stepping back. Sometimes it's about the presence. Mostly it's about uplifting and centering other people whose voices have not been heard, other people who don't have access to resources or systems that we're really shepherding and working towards. So it's very much communal, and about groups. It's very collaborative, working together. It's very co-creative. Even though an idea might come through something I say or you say, it's about now, what do we do together? Who needs to be part of this to create the kind of world we want to live in? So I think we've learned the limitations of the anti movements, right? Even energetically, they just do something very different. If I talk to you and I can have a whole conversation about what I am against, what I do not, but that will not energize. You'll notice a very different energy in me. So I think these are the kind of conversations that I like to hold and have. It's like, what do you stand for? What do you want your life to stand for when it's over? What were you for? What did you learn during COVID that you can bring out of that now and give to the world? Because it's needed right now.
You and I could complete each other's sentences, Susan. I just gave a presentation today where I'm saying something almost exactly like what you've been saying. And by the way, I did actually get moved to tears at one point because I was reflecting on something that inspired me. And so when we get inspired, sometimes we get moved to tears. And to your point, wearing your emotions on your sleeve. And so I like being in that world. That's the world I want to live in. So to that point, I wanted to ask you about what is your vision of the world as embodied in this movement toward a culture of care? What does that look like?
Well, a little bit like what you read earlier at the beginning of my book, and then what I want to do is to go on in, if this is a book or I don't know how it's going to come out into the world, but that it is stories of people acting in the world every day, from embodying their purpose, to make it so that people can start looking around and go, oh yes, my neighbor does that. Oh, my husband does that they can see it. And then we inspire each other. Something I have really witnessed is that we can't become ourselves by ourselves. I actually did a lot in my own self-awareness and development journey. And I got to the point where I was like, you can no longer sit on this cushion, girl. You have got to get into the world. That's what I missed most about COVID, is bumping up against the world. That's where I learned the most about my purpose, where I have opportunities to give, right? So when we humans can really embrace that all of this othering is holding us back from the truth, which is belonging and becoming beloved community. And that means all of us, that the circle has to be, you can go right back to Miss Janine on that circle in Montessori, or Mr. Rogers. It's until we are all part of this, and as equals in a circle model, right? We are equals. Even if I'm facilitating, I am right here with you. I'm going to be vulnerable with you. I don't hold any access to anything greater than you. And so it's happening. I mean, in our families, in our communities, we are being, I think, this better version of ourselves, which is that we move from what we care about. We've also learned so much about our emotional intelligence and heart math. I love the Heart Math Institute. What they're discovering is, our brains are fabulous, but our hearts, wow, 5,000 times more that energy. So this is just an untapped potential, and it's best activated when we come together, around something we care about, such as like the kind of world we want to live in. And there are conditions like COVID that are going to pressure us into that. I think the climate, we see that. We just had a tornado in Chicago 2 days ago.
Wow.
We see this climate, and we're talking like, what are we going to do? How are we going to come together to really survive this, right? And to nurture each other and live the lives that we want to live together.
Oh my gosh, Susan, That is a great way to finish the show. We are out of time, and you have been spectacular. I'm certain that our listeners and viewers don't want to give you up, so you got to find her and connect with her. So, Susan, thank you for sharing your heart, mind, and soul with us today.
Thank you, Elise. It's been a pleasure.
Listeners and viewers, if you want to learn more about Susan Lucci and the work she is doing as a circle tender and purpose guide, start by visiting her website at pursueyourpurpose.co. Again, that's pursueyourpurpose.co. And again, thanks to our partnering sponsor, WorkProud, which helps companies build a platform where your workforce receives meaningful feedback, and thanks for their work from people across your company. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch it via recorded podcast. We were on the air with Bob Graham and Eugenia Duran of Namaste Direct, talking about how this nonprofit came to be as an expression of Bob's promise to himself to go 50-50 at 50, meaning spend 50% of his life toward work and making money, and the other 50% towards service by the time he was 50. And I'm now on that board, that as well. So 35 years later, his work lives on in this dynamic organization, and that is dedicated to empowering Guatemalan business owners and entrepreneurs, women specifically, with business education and microloans to transform them from poverty to at least middle class. Amazing group. Next week, we'll be on the air with Charles Antis, talking about his refusal to stray from being a cheerleader for good, while also stewarding a very successful roofing business. See you there. Remember that work is at least a third of our life, so let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.